Alright, today guys I'm going to show you how to work on this right here. I really just got to take it apart and clean it. This is the quantity adjuster on my 2002 Volkswagen Golf. Any of them with the VE type pump before the common rail is set up right here. You can tell the hard lines. If you guys know what this is, you know what I'm talking about. But anyway, the quantity adjuster here, I've had to take it apart once before and clean it. And what will happen is I end up getting a quantity adjuster error, and when I first got the car it was idling really bad, up and down, oscillate about 150 RPMs, up and down, back and forth. And I tried just about everything I could think of and looked at everything, but couldn't find anything, and eventually decided to open up the quantity adjuster, and that was out of where the problem was actually. I had to take it down, I had to disassemble all of this, and you can see I've got the cap here. And the first time I did it, you know, I was kind of learning it as I go, and just want to share with you guys exactly how I did it and what it looks like inside. So here's a little quick video showing how I do that. First thing you want to do is you're going to remove the 4 screws that hold it on. That's the cap of the quantity adjuster, and 3 of them look like this. I believe it's a T25 or T27 Torx. The 4th one is a little interesting. It's a longer bolt, goes all the way through right here, and you'll notice that it's got 3 sides on it. And well, I didn't really have the 3-sided tool, and at the time I was trying to get as cheap as I could to make sure this car worked before I spent some money on it. So I did the next best thing, and I hammered on a 6.7 millimeter socket, and it seems to work good. So didn't really strip the bolt out, and it keeps on working, and I've taken this cap off a handful of times. So yeah, works good. But I wouldn't advise doing it. I would get the proper tool, but if you're like me and you're trying to be cheap, you can do that. So you take the cap off, and I just set it right here. And of course you want to make sure that you don't get any kind of dirt or soil or anything like that in the cap itself or in this, because this is obviously way after the filter. And if you're lucky and you get anything out of there, it'll actually come out this way and go through the return line on the cap, and then head back to the tank or to the filter and get it filtered out. However, there is a huge chance that any kind of soil or anything get heavy in there will go down into the actual pump below. And this whole chamber here fills with diesel, and any of the diesel that gets past the relief valve, which is actually what this quantity adjuster controls, any of it does comes upwards and lubricates all these components here, and then goes through into that little hole there, into this relief valve, return line. And so what we're looking at today is this actual quantity adjuster. This is known as the N146 sensor. You know, if you ever have a quantity adjuster error, it might say N146. Underneath this is actually the G149, I believe, and that's what actually controls the I'm trying to think of that actual name for this. I'll look it up in a second, but the G149 is actually what moves it. It's the magnetic control underneath the coil, and the N146 is what you see on top of here, and that is an actual sensor. And what it composes of is, I'm trying to get this lighting right. If you've never looked at it on the inside before, you've got this arm right here. You can see there it travels along on the right side of this ring. And what happens is there's 5 volts of alternating current passing through these coils right here. And I'm certainly no electrical engineer, but what I understand about it is you get a voltage readout depending on the position of this from the N146, and that in turn tells the computer how much throttle is being applied or how much is being injected. On this left side here, there's a copper bit, and if you undo that T10 right there, you can actually move this a little bit. I've played around with it. I wouldn't really recommend it. I don't think it'll help your situation if you get the same error as me. From the way I understand it, it just kind of sets a, I guess a baseline, if you will, a reference point, I guess. And so I think it's a reference point to the low side. But I do know if you alter this, if you move this down, it will in turn move the voltage down from the low point and the high point on the quantity adjuster. And that being said, let me quickly just show you exactly what the error is I have going on. So in my OBD11, you can see I have a quantity adjuster upper limit stop value, P1562. And you'll get that code if the voltage doesn't read out right on the startup. So when you turn the key on, this little solenoid here does a solenoid's maybe not the right word, but you'll see this arm. If you have someone that's trying to key, you'll see it move all the way up and then back down. And what it does is the computer reads the voltage at the lowest spot, and then it sweeps this arm up, and it should read the voltage at the highest spot, that being your lower and upper limit, respectively. And what'll happen is if the voltage doesn't line up right, you'll either get a 1562 upper limit, or I don't know if it's 1561 or 1563 for the lower limit, but those voltages have to be right, or it'll throw a code, of course. Now, if you don't have any voltage coming from this, I've learned this from experience. So I had a disconnected wire in here, and I'll show you that in a minute. But if you have that happen, you will not be able to start the vehicle. It will not allow any fuel to be injected. And I don't know if it activates the fuel shutoff solenoid, or if it just does something internally in the quantity adjuster, but you will be getting no fuel. Now, let me show you really quick before we proceed what exactly I mean by the voltage. So if you get VCDS or you've got OBD11, you're going to go into the engine block, and it's channel 19. And channel 19 will bring up two voltages. Key has to be on for this, obviously. So the first value is the lower limit, and that's at 0.94. And that's actually good as long as it's under 1 volt, from the way I understand it, is spec. I have also heard 9.5, 9.4, something like that, so you may need to look it up. Maybe if it varies, maybe each engine calls for a different one, but from what I understand, under 1 volt is right for that. Between half a volt and 1 volt is your target there. So that's in line, and that's why I'm not getting a lower limit error. However, value 2 is 4.14. Now that I know for sure should be over 4.15 to 4.74. Ultimately, what the issue is this value 2 is not high enough. And what that's telling the computer is that when it calls for this to sweep up, it's not going as far as it should. And so the computer is letting you know through this error that I'm getting the 1562 error, that basically it can't give all the throttle at once. And so that'll cause a check engine light and a glow plug, flashing glow plug. All that said, thank you for bearing with me. You got a little understanding of how it works now. I'm going to go ahead and show you bits and pieces of how I get inside of this thing. And again, cleanliness is definitely recommended. I have a pile of paper towels I tend to use to put all the parts on and wrap them up so we can get them apart and clean it. But the first thing you want to do after you take the cover off is you're going to take these two nuts off right here. And I've already loosened them a bit, and you can see this moving. What this is right here is actually a cover for some electrical components in there. It keeps them from shorting out on one another, and also keeps them from rounding out on the case for the quantity adjuster. Now, do not lose these, because anything inside of here you cannot buy individually. Best of my knowledge, this is a fuel temperature sensor, and that is about the only thing I know you can buy individually and find without putting in a lot of effort. So after you take those 8mm nuts off, you're going to pull this up, and this is just a simple piece of plastic, and you notice there's little channels in here. I don't know if you can see it, but the channels are designed to go between these connectors here. Now, if you're running a stock pump, injector pump, these will be welded on, not soldered. So you can see I've got solder there, and that is because I've opened it up already and had to cut the welds off. If you do have to cut the welds off, I would urge you to be very careful, because if you notice, there is a pretty sizable gap under here where the pins come in. And again, these pins are running from this main wiring harness up to this sealed plastic piece. And they run up, sorry, I can't get the focus right. They run up and they solder to the pins that go to this quantity adjuster board. And if they are welded from the factory, you will not get them off with a soldering iron, and you'll have to take a bull nose and you'll have to clip it. And I would do each one individually, and what I did was I held the end of it with a needle nose best I could and clipped it and tried to catch everything, because if anything falls down there and you neglect to find it and get it out and it gets inside the pump, it could really do some damage. So what we're going to do is, since I've already soldered these on, I'm going to off scene really quick, I'm going to desolder these, and then I'll show you how to remove the board afterwards, and we'll see the G15149 underneath, and let's see what that looks like. Alright guys, I have disconnected the batteries, and I have successfully desoldered all these right here, and you can't really tell, but they are loose, but still their pressure's being applied to them, so they still look like they're soldered. But yeah, they're unsoldered, so if you cut that, unsolder it, whatever you got to do, you're good to go. And now we can move on to the rest of the board. First thing we're going to do is we're going to remove these two T10s. If you notice, there's an electrical connector they hold down. That's the entire reason they're there. The other side of the connection is soldered into the board. I believe it's one of these 3 pins right here for this one and that one. And so you're just going to loosen those up. You don't have to take them out all the way, if I remember right. Maybe I will, so that I can slightly pull up that that copper line underneath. You see, you don't want to damage that copper wire underneath. That would be a mess. But if you want to start, you can start with these nuts right here. These should also be 8mm, those 3. And I'm going to take those off and come back and show you how to do the rest. Alright, so I've got those 3 off, and I do apologize, they are 7mm. So next I'll get the top one off here. This is a T15. I've already loosened it up. What you'll do is you'll grab a open wrench, and I like to counter hold it on there while you pull that out or loosen that up. So I've got it loosened up. We'll go ahead and pull this out. So sure enough, just a screw. Put that safely away. And now what you'll do with this is kind of pressed on to the modulating displacement piston, and there's like a cam it's attached to. And so what you got to do is you've got to go ahead and, even with that screw out, it's still got enough tension on it to move with the piston below. So what you want to do is you want to just kind of push it up or all the way down, not too hard, just enough. See how that just loosely broke it? And once it's loose on there, you can feel it broke. You just wiggle it and pull it up a little bit, and now that it's loose, you can't remove it until you remove the board, but it is loose. So now when we do go to remove the board, it'll be easier to do. And like I said before, we'll go ahead and loosen up these copper T10s right here. I don't want to completely take them out. Also, they are reverse threads. Good to know. So righty loosen, lefty tighty, I guess. So yeah, loosen those up. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and take them off just so I can safely remove these copper lines right here and pry them up a little bit. I really don't want to damage this. As I said, all these components can be quite difficult to find if you can find them individually at all. So bear with me one moment. So I've gone ahead and taken those copper screws out. Remember, they're reverse threaded. So right hand to get them off, left hand to get them on. And I've pried these pins up, these wire leads, just enough so that I can get the board out. Really soft metal here. I believe it's just solid copper, and you really don't want to damage that or break that off. You'll have to do some soldering to repair that if you did. So if my solder joints are truly loose, and they look like they are, we can go ahead and slowly remove this up. And I'll have to go a little bit to the right hand first in order to not damage the lines on the left side. So I'm just slowly wiggling it up, and let's see if we can get this thing off of here. Again, just trying to be very careful not to damage anything, so I'm taking my time. I think what's holding me up is some of these leads have still got solder on them, and they're catching the circuit board. So I'm going to go ahead and just pop them out a little bit, make sure they're nice and loose and not sticking in there. I believe that was my issue. There we go. Alright, we've got this off. So be careful with this. We're going to go ahead and place this right here for now. And this is your quantity adjuster. All the electrical components. Doesn't look too dirty, but the modulating piston is the part that actually gets dirty, or at least the cam that controls it. So this is it. See, this is loose, and like I said, that just presses on. that's it. It's a pretty simple circuit. The wire leads look like they just follow on the board to where they go. It would really be terrible if this broke, because I don't know where you'd find a replacement if you could. Set that there with my other parts. And let's look at what we got here. This is the cam that controls the control collar. You see, this is what we were moving earlier, and I really don't know if there's any way to tell exactly how dirty it is until we get it open, but the honest truth is it really doesn't look that bad. So well, we'll take it off and see what we can find. In order to do that, you have to first remove these two springs. They have little hooks on the end. I'll do that, and then I'll also remove these studs. I think they're 8mm, but just simple enough. They should be regular left-hand threads to get them off, and let me go ahead and do that. Alright, we're back, and again I made the mistake. They are 7mm, not 8, but I've gone ahead and taken off those 4 studs along with the springs, so now we can quite freely move the, well, not with this out probably, but that would be the actual quantity adjuster itself, the modulating displacement cam, or piston, whatever terminology is. So you just want to turn this where it's level like that, so you can go ahead and pull this out. Just pull it out ever so carefully, not too difficult. And you want to look inside of there, and also on this. If you notice, there'll be some, let me get some good light here. There'll be some stuff stuck to it. I'm not sure if it's magnetic. If it's magnetic, that's kind of worrisome because it may be metal parts. But yeah, you can see some actually right there. See some that build up there. It'll be along the whole thing actually, and it does look metallic. So you know, maybe everybody's right that these pumps are going out when you get this issue, but I don't want to give up quite yet on it, and I think maybe I can get a few more miles out of it just by cleaning it up. And I know what you're thinking, wow, that doesn't look like much at all, but I can tell you from the last time I did this, yes, it was a lot worse last time I did it, a lot more material, and there was also some diesel, I don't know what to call them, contaminants, or just some oxidized diesel that had got some solid bits, and they were all in there. And I'll go ahead and insert a picture of that in the video now and show you what that looked like. So you know, you may have that in the tank, so you may have that in your pump as well, and if so, you definitely want to get it out with a clean paper towel. You know, something that's always interested me is this hole at the bottom. You can see some of the need something to point at it. Some of these metallic, I don't know if that's a shim or what that is, but it does appear to be broken on this side, and honestly I have no idea what that is. I've taken the control adjuster, quantity adjuster, excuse me, completely off by undoing those 4 screws, and really it looks the same on the other side. I don't know exactly how that damage could have occurred, or if it's something from the factory, or I don't know. I bought the car with 160,000 miles, so I'm not sure of its entire history, but I was told by the previous owner that the pump was rebuilt. I don't know how to verify that, but that is what he told me. It was rebuilt once, I believe 20,000 miles ago or something. So hopefully the seals and all that are intact from that, and the internals are good, but for now I'm going to go ahead and clean up this quantity adjuster. I want to get off this, anything on there I can possibly get off. You can even see some down there. I don't know if it's a seal or just a bearing, but we're going to get everything out of here and clean it up. And I don't want to use any kind of brake cleaner or anything that's going to mess with the fuel. So I guess just using a dry paper towel, we'll see what we can do, and I'll get right back at you. So this is the metallic goodness, or whatever exactly it is. That was along where the modulating piston displacement cam, sorry I don't know the exact terminology, but where it actually spun, it was inside of this, right around that collar that wraps around. And I'm going to go ahead and clean the rest of it up. You can notice there's some more here and all over the place, but this is what actually causes the problem from my experience. It's when that metallic junk gets between here and that piston. I don't know how, why, but I do know it affects that voltage coming out. My previous theory when it was gunked up was that as it tries to do the sweep initially and go back, the computer just sends out a certain pre-measured out voltage very quickly through this coil here. And my theory is that the resistance of the diesel gunk and whatever that other junk is, probably just my luck, part of the inside of my pump that's ground up. But as it builds up here, it creates a little bit of resistance. And just given the short amount of time that sweep happens, possibly it's not reaching the full extent of the arm. Because if you'll notice, and maybe I can show you later, but when this is all attached, and before we take anything off, we can go ahead and turn this, and we are moving the modulating piston displacement solenoid, cam, whatever it is. We're moving it, the actual quantity adjuster, when we move this by hand, when it's all attached. And when you do, you can feel it moving. And if you look at group 001 in VCDS or OBD11, you can get a live readout of the voltage from this side, from the N146. And you know, if you rest your hand off, it'll go to the voltage found in group 019. That's the lower quantity stop point, I guess. And as you turn it up, you'll see it changing in group 001. And you'll notice that you can move it by hand higher than the voltage of the second value in group 19. And so again, telling me seems that there's no issue inside the pump, at least not with the control collar that this part controls. So you know, there may be far more than I understand about this pump, but you know, just trying to save some money and try to repair this thing the best I can. So I'll get this cleaned up and put back inside and see what it does. Okay, I just learned two things, two valuable lessons. So I use compressed air to clean out around the bottom of that cam right there, and also the surrounding area. And one thing I learned, very important, is if you're using compressed air, make sure you stay away from these holes and that hole, especially that one, because if not, you'll get diesel on quite a lot of things, including one of your favorite two eyeballs, probably. That's fun. So yeah, it looks like I got all the metal out of there. Now the thing I was going to mention also, pretty important, this may be an indicator as to what's going on, is to look at the outside of this shaft. You notice it's like a bronze color. Let's take a look at the iron core from the coil. And you'll see it's got like a copper tone to it. Now, I don't even have the slightest clue what it is. This is an iron core from what I understand, so I don't know if it's a coating or what, or maybe I'm completely wrong about it being an iron core, but you notice, see that kind of metallic, rose colored. This just looks like it's the same from first glance, but I did notice some wear on it. You can see, it's very hard to see with the camera, but you can notice on this side it's got more of a silver tone to it. If I didn't have diesel on my fingers, I could zoom in a bit. You see what I mean? It's got some war area right there where the color changes, and also on the other side. So not too sure why it would wear like that. Okay guys, this is a continued exploratory surgery on the QA, and I think I've made a pretty significant discovery, and it may be maybe what's causing the damage on the cam iron core in both of them. And if you notice, this iron core, without these studs completely pushed down or tightened, you notice there's a bit of playing, quite a bit. And let's look at it from the top. Let's see if I can get a good angle on it. Okay, so you notice there is much more play on this side underneath than there is on top. And maybe this is the reason for the wear. Maybe this is the reason for the metal. Maybe it's not the play up and down in this. Perhaps that's actually, I would hate to say normal, but it does look like it's pressed in. So I don't know if the play directly up and down will have anything to do with that. Obviously, side to side would cause it to have some issues and rub. But what I'm thinking of doing is I'm thinking of, as I'm tightening these studs up, pushing it up and trying to get the play equal on both sides. And that way there's no chance of it rubbing, you know, as it moves. And like I said, this part moves a lot, so even the slightest bit of friction on there is going to cause some serious wear. And the whole point of this quantity adjuster, this electronic one of the things Volkswagens I was really proud of, at least in the documentation, they brag on the fact that has little wear, and it would if this part possibly wasn't causing it by rubbing. By rubbing on there, it obviously is going to wear. But I think if we clean it up, maybe if we realign this right, maybe this could solve the issue. Certainly hopeful. So I'm going to go ahead and, like I said, I'm going to try to get the play the same on each side, and well, not so much the play, but the spacing, and we'll see what happens. Alright guys, so I'm actually really excited now. I think the whole entire issue being caused by this code and the sweep not being able to go all the way up, I think everything to do with it is this core, this iron core rubbing on the shaft or the cam. And so I think the issue is the core, like I showed just now. It had a lot of play in it, and of course when you bolt it down, that's going to get out of there. But the mass amount of play allows for some offset, so it's very possible to tighten this core down with the top of the shaft rubbing or the bottom. And if you notice, the clearance level, check out that gap right there, the clearance gets tighter as it goes around like that, and maybe that's from wear. Quite possibly could be as much metal as I found in there, magnetic stuff. If that's what it is, pieces of iron, that would make sense. And this bottom part, you're gonna have to use a flashlight. Maybe you can just see it there, but you'll have to use a flashlight from behind and from the side to make sure that you have full clearance down there. And it can be a little hard with this flange in the way for the springs, but basically when you put it back together, and I'm sure I messed this up last time because I wasn't expecting it, and I'm quite sure now looking at this that this pump really was rebuilt 20,000 miles ago, whether it was done at home or in a garage or sent off to a shop. I think this core wasn't mounted back right, or maybe it shifted after a little bit of use, maybe from heating and cooling or something. I don't know, but I'm really excited because I'm really would make a lot of sense that as the metal from the iron core, the shaft, begins to grind off and the little chunks get magnetized, they stick to this core and to the shaft, and they get between it, and it would cause quite a lot of resistance. And maybe we're not feeling that resistance when we just take the top of the quantity adjuster and turn it before we get this deep down into it. But it would make a lot of sense that if the computer sends a specified amount of voltage for a certain duration through this coil to get it to the maximum upper limit for the quantity injector, it sends that voltage through for the duration, and it encounters too much resistance on the shaft, and so the N146 never measures the proper voltage for the max, and it doesn't get high enough. And if you notice, with me, when I have this problem, I turn the key off, I turn it back on, and if I check in group 19 again, the voltage will be different in the second field almost every time, and it's never consistent. And that would make sense, all that metal bits in there and everything. So I'm quite excited, as you can hear. I'm going to go ahead and get this back together, and I noticed again, you need to be careful putting this back together. You want to get that play right. You want to take advantage of that little bit of play and align this correctly. Put all this back together, and if I see anything else worth noting, I'll let you know. One thing I just noticed you want to be aware of is when you put the springs back on, it will add some force, and I don't think it's anything to worry about if you tighten these studs and one nut down, bolt down, tight enough. But do check your clearance after you put the springs back on. Alright, as far as soldering these things on, I would urge you to be very careful. First off, because you don't want anything to fall down below. Let me see where my screwdriver is. Third, I once had this connector, the last time I did it, I didn't solder it good enough, and I got about maybe a couple hundred miles, and this connector, the solder broke in between the lines, and if that connection breaks, that's actually the wire that's sending the voltage back for the N146. And as I said earlier in the video, if you have that thing disconnected or not receiving voltage, then you will basically not be able to do anything, because your car won't start, they'll never inject fuel, and so you want to be really careful that you do a good job, not just not making a mess, but you want to make sure they're not going to come off. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to use this screwdriver because I see the end's a little dirty. So we get the solder off. All right, got it off. Okay, so what I'd urge you to do is take your screwdriver, come right here, and just twist a little bit. Make sure that top moves too. And I would do that on each pin, because if you can, if the bottom is going to break off, I feel like putting a little bit of tension on this through the solder joint is a good test to make sure that wouldn't break off. So if I was doing that, and I'd also mention these copper screws again, or they're more like screws than bolts, but bolts, whatever. Copper is very soft. Don't put them on as tight as I did last time, because you saw, and I didn't video earlier, but I had a little bit of hard time getting these off. So you want to make sure you don't put them on very tight. The only thing they're doing is providing continuity between the inside connector in this board and this leg of the coil. I think the connector inside the board is gold, and this connector is copper. So this screw is going to strip out before the board, which is good, I guess, but at the same time you want maximum continuity. I don't know if that's the right word, but you want a good conducting material. So to replace this with a regular bolt, probably not a good idea, and I don't know where you'd find another copper bolt at. I don't know, maybe I got that backwards too. Maybe the board will strip out before the gold, but I think gold's harder than copper. If not, you're in even more of a world of hurt, because this board is probably really hard to find unless you get a used injection pump. But moral of the story, put these on just snug. You don't need to put them on very tight. They just need to provide a little bit of tension and push down on this copper connector. And that's pretty much it for that. So, all right, guys, everything is back in. I've gone ahead and replaced this shielding plastic over the connectors. And like I said earlier, it's got little slits in it. So you want to put the back on first, make sure it goes over each one correctly. You're not going to break anything, and then just put it down, bolt it down, or screw it down with the nuts. Those are 7mm again, not 8. And I also put this, snug this back up on the shaft, and I put that screw back in. Not too snug, just a little bit, because what I'm going to do now is turn the key on, because I need to recalibrate the position of this relative to the cylinder below. And in order to do that, we'll have to put the key back on, which means I'm going to go ahead and connect the battery back. Let me get a 2mm. It's not a 10. Apparently I really loosened that thing up earlier. Snug. I'm going to go ahead and cycle the key. What that'll do is that will make the sweep happen. That sweep again is what I mentioned earlier. I'm pretty sure it happens very quick. You can hear it click just having the hood open without the top of the cover off. You can actually hear it usually. And I think the click is it returning back. What I'm doing now is I'm booting up OBD11. It's connecting. Don't know if you guys use OBD11. I know when it first came out it had a lot of bugs and people were really against it. Obviously VCDS has earned its reputation, and for 200 bucks, if you've got the money, man, it is well worth it. But like I said, this is a cheap car. Started off $800 investment, and maybe now invested in some better things like a front mounted intercooler and stuff. But originally I was trying to be cheap and make sure this is worth putting money into before I started investing. So OBD11 is pretty good. I used it for my my auto to manual swap. Got my nice 5-speed down there. Worked good for that, and use it for diagnostic. Don't know what else more you could ask for. The only thing it doesn't have is the TDI timing graph. So you do have to go into group 000 manually and read the numbers and do it. And this is a really good sign, guys. I haven't had voltage in the second value like that ever. Ever. So this is really good. You notice the first value is above 1 volt, and the second value is also too high. It needs to be under 4.74. So we're gonna just loosen this up a little bit. Actually, I didn't even put it on tight, so I'll go ahead and show you how I do that. I'm going to grab your 10 millimeter again. With this center screw loose, you take this, actually, it's already broke, it's not even on right. Okay, so show you how to do this. Now that that's loose, and what it's doing is it's freely spinning, not turning the cylinder behind it. So we're going to go into OBD11 or VCDS. I'm going to change to channel 1. And the fourth value in channel 1 is a live feed of that sensor. And so you see, modulating piston displacement sensor, that is the N146. It is running at 1.12, excuse me, volts. So my numbers right now are 0.6 and 4.48. That's good, man. That's right about mid-range for the high stop on the IQ. And really quickly, this is how I did it. I loosened this up, and I loosened this up. This is a T10, this is a T15. Of course, I used a 10 millimeter wrench to break the hole this had on the piston below. And I lined this up right here with this is I think the pickup for the sensor. Probably not the right terminology, but I lined it up right up with that, okay? And that gave me 0.6 volts, and I was like, okay, that's good. So I screwed this back in, and what I did was I pulled up the group 01, which gives you the live one. And I'll go ahead and show you how I do that. A little bit of diesel on my fingers. So I went to group 1, and the live voltage for that is 0.6, the modulating piston displacement sensor. And if you move this with your finger, you'll see it moves up. And what I did was I positioned it in the right place for this voltage to be where it is now. It's 0.6, and then I pushed it all the way down. So you hear that knock? That's the high point of the IQ, and quantity adjuster, and it is 4.48. So doing that, that's pretty much it. Now you may have to play around with this a little bit. Quick note, I said earlier, I believe that this copper piece here was the set point for, I guess, the N146 calibration. Now I stupidly, I think it was a mistake anyway, I took it out, I took this whole ring assembly out, and I clipped off the stopper on the back of that, because this copper piece moves a little bit, but before I realized what was going on inside the QA the first time, I cut it thinking it was a calibration issue, thinking something was worn inside, electronic wise anyway, and that, yeah, I don't know, it was pretty dumb, without understanding how it works. And it doesn't affect me much at all, except it makes this more complicated, resetting and positioning this sensor correctly. For you at home, this shouldn't be as much of an issue, because that stop should be in place, and you should only have a very minimal amount of space you can move there. Wouldn't touch it unless you have to, but it's there if you need a little bit more play. So that's it. Be sure to know that when you put that back on, that top, it will mess up the a little bit of the magnetic field. I guess it'll alter it, and it will change the numbers very discreetly. My experience, the numbers usually go up 0.02, so very discreet, but hopefully this guy helps you guys out. I'm really hoping that this is the issue with the clearance in there with the iron core. If that's the case, sad to say, but some people have been throwing out some really good injector pumps or sending them off to get rebuilt when they didn't need to be. But if you don't know how to do this and you want to try it yourself, this is how I did it.